Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Cal Logan. Cal, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Glad we could have you on. I've been, checking your stuff out on Instagram for a while. Grab book one, everything. So it's I'm like a year behind on my review. So don't worry, everybody. I'm like crunching right now. So I'm doing a lot better. So I told a couple people, I was like, you're on my next year list if I can get, or the next fall, I guess I should say. But yeah, so I've had an amazing like stack going, but too many good books out there, so and not enough time in the day. But I really appreciate you coming on and letting us chat with you about you and your world and your writing, and can't wait to get started. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we'll start with that first question. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
It's been pretty crazy. So I initially started off as um, trying to get a traditional publishing deal. And so I started writing seriously. I've been writing my whole life since I was a kid, but I started writing seriously in winter of 2017. So I'm in my like 8th year now. I wrote my first book, and that one was called Sundering. It took me, I think I started querying after about 2 years, got a bunch of rejections, and then off of a Twitter pitch event, I actually got some interest from a small press, and they ended up giving me an offer. And I was like super excited, I was like, oh, I did it. Uh, and I had a buddy from the gym who was a published author, so he looked at the contract for me and basically kind of took the wind out of my sails a little bit. He told me more or less what I needed to hear, gave me a little bit of tough love that said, like, this is not a great offer. There's no advance. The royalties are the standard minimum. Like, you even have to pay for your own author copies, stuff like that. He said this is basically the very cautious language of a publisher who does not sell a lot of copies. And so they're minimizing their risk at your expense. He's like, you will technically be published. He's like, but is this what you really wanted out of this? So he asked me some hard-hitting questions and basically told me, he's like, the fact that you're getting offers like this, but not good offers from a bigger press means that your work is like good, but not good enough. He's like, I would go back and do everything it takes to make it as great as possible. So you're almost there. You're not there yet. Go back and improve the work. And I took his advice. I turned down the offer, which is very hard for me to do.
Yeah.
Worked on it for another 2 years, requeried, got an agent, and then at that point, it died on sub after about a year. So the first like 5 years was all on one project, and that eventually went nowhere. When that was on sub, I started writing what is now Shadowbane, and it was initially a standalone. And then my agent left the industry pretty much right after I completed Shadowbane and sent it to him. So then that left me in a really awkward position because I had a giant. It was 200,000 words in the first draft. And that first draft is now what is going to be split and fleshed into a trilogy. But at the time, it was, just he wanted a standalone.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'll just give you a giant standalone. So I had this giant book that was still kind of rough. There's no way I was going to be able to requery it to someone else. And you can get away with stuff when you already have an agent, but getting a new one is just, less wiggle room. So I did some hard thinking, and that was when I decided to self-publish. I was kind of fed up with like the wait times, and the idea of having creative control was also really appealing. And just having gotten a glimpse behind the curtain, I realized that the trad industry is just not really what I want out of my career. So that started the journey of then being an indie author and publishing Shadowbane.
I gotta say, I feel for you, Cal, for first offer. Like I had one, and it was like my thing is like I was like so new. This was probably like I don't know 12 years ago, so I was in the same boat. But it was like a independent publisher, but it was really a vanity press pretending to be a independent publisher. And I just like said my idea, and I was like, yeah, I'm writing this. They're like, oh, we want this and stuff. So I actually sent it to Forgotten Realms author like Paul S. Kemp. Thank you, Paul, still to this day. He was like, dude, this is not like, he just told me no. He goes, I know it's really hard. He goes, but no, he's like, it's just not a good plan. So to this day, I'm thankful for Paul just telling me no. It saved me from having to do it. So would you say?
How do you know Paul?
Oh, actually, Paul, like years ago, like had like a separate like Facebook account. Oh, like a personal account. And that's like what everybody was doing at the time. Now a lot of people like him like have just gone to like an author account. But I had actually met him like online through some other people, like some other authors and stuff that had met like an event, which was really cool. So yeah, so I just ended up like chatting with him and stuff. So and then he got off Facebook for a little bit, and then he actually got back on like a few years ago. I actually got to interview Richard Lee Byers, which was awesome. Richard and Paul, Elaine Cunningham, and then like Bob A. Salvatore, like all the like those four are like the reason I wanted to write. Getting
Okay.
to and Troy Denning, so getting to interview Richard was amazing. So, and I've kind of danced with Paul a little bit, like messaging. I just I'm always so busy, and some of the bigger names it's hard, because it's like I have a toddler, so it's like it's kind of hard. Like I don't want to like get them for the show and then have to reschedule. So I've been kind of waiting until the summertime where he's at daycare and I know I have the time. But Richard was amazing, and Paul's always awesome online. So yeah, he definitely, I was just like a random nobody just asking him a question. So, most people would ignore you. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it
that's really
just, yeah, it just speaks a lot to like his character and who he is. So, but a lot of the Forgotten Realms people, I feel like are like that, and Dragonlance people, they're just cool people. So, but I
cool.
feel like it was very difficult. So to this day, I'm like, oh man, but I'm really thankful for him. So it's good to get good advice, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see the Forgotten Realms shelf over here.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
I grew up on the Legend of Drizzt, and I
Oh yeah.
R.A. Salvatore, he was my favorite author for such a long time. His work was like really formative. And then I have the on there the War of the Spider Queen, and I know that Richard Lee Byers and Paul Kemp both contributed to that series.
Yep.
Um, I forget if Troy did as well, but I've read some of it. I've
Yeah, I
read some
can't
of their
remember.
I read some of their because each book's by a different person. R.A. Salvatore he just
Yep.
oversaw it all. But that series was probably kind of like the most like the first like grim darky thing I'd ever read. Even though it's in
Oh,
that very
interesting.
traditional world, but
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you've read that series, you know how it ends, and it's just utterly brutal, and everybody is evil and selfish because it's all the Drow. That
Yeah.
that was probably like what kind of turned me on to like, oh hey, like I kind of like
It's
this
cool.
when like the hero
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't win, and you just you're just in this like chaos, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, yeah. I love all their stuff. Like Richard's like his like I'm totally blank right now, but like his it's like Whispers of Flame or something like that. But it's like they have these cool griffins. It's like this mercenary company. Just like amazing, amazing. There's like five, and it was right when they were tapering off. So like the last one is like I found for like $45. And that's like I'm like afraid to read it. So now that like Kindle has bought all of them, or they're selling them on Kindle, I've been actually just saving them on my shelf, the older ones, and then or more like valuable ones, and then I've just been just reading them online, and then having the Audible too is really cool. Kind of like takes me back. But yeah, I highly recommend any of them, their solo stuff. But that was a cool thing where they were all like coming together to do that. I
Yeah.
like the Sundering too and stuff, where a bunch of them like Ed and Bob and other people were getting involved. It's just they always just did cool things. That's what I want to do myself, is like create a world and then have other people like pop in and stuff. I don't think there's enough like Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance nowadays. Galaxy's Edge, I think, is like one of the nearest things I think you really get to that at this point. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was definitely, yeah, I agree with, I like that word, formative, definitely formative for me. So that's really cool. Yeah, if I've always read the Forgotten Realms, like just go check it out. Same with Dragonlance. But I'm so happy to hear that though, Cal, because that was actually Forgotten Realms for me, same thing. There was like different ones, maybe than War of the Spider Queen, but yeah, like I never really thought of Grimdark until like Joe Abercrombie came about, and then I was like, oh, I guess I do kind of read Grimdark, or I have read Grimdark, so it's kind of that same realization. But speaking of genres, so what genres are you currently writing, and why?
Basically all fantasy. So Shadowbane is it's the second book I've written. The first book I published. That'll be, the first in a trilogy. And that's all very grimdark. I have ideas for other projects that would, definitely be fantasy, but not necessarily grimdark. This is just kind of where I wanted to start off because I had this idea and I just it was like coming out of me. So I was like, all right, I have to get this down. So that's primarily like where my interest is. I've dabbled in writing like some horror short stories and stuff like
Oh,
that.
cool.
Um, yeah, I'm kind of like a one trick pony. Like, fantasy is where I live and die.
I feel like that's fair. I originally was into sci-fi, so I was writing that like first, but Yeah, fantasy. Like when I discovered the Forgotten Realms, actually, it completely took over my life. Like
Yeah.
my mom was like, as an eighth grade, she was like, I can't believe we're reading this many books. You know, they were like $3 at the time. And she was like, I was like, do well in a test or something. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna buy you more. So like that was like my thing. She said to the station, she goes, you were the easiest kid. She goes, I'd buy $6, buy you 2 books. She goes, and you would go to your room or whatever, be around the house and be like reading nonstop. I was like, we could thank the great authors there, but nothing wrong with being a one-trick pony, just saying, because there's a lot of people that do really well with that. So that's awesome though. So now my favorite question to ask people, of course, is about their books, their world, things like that. So what is your book Shadowbane about, and how did you come up with this idea?
So I'll talk about what it's about first and the idea. It's kind of funny to see what it came to be from the initial seed, but I'll get back to that. But Shadowbane follows a pair of twins named Jin and Shura, who are mercenary demon hunters in a world that is modeled heavily off of feudal Japan. So if you think like Shogun, but demons are real, and the main two characters are kind of like Ronin samurai who are hunting them for, and they're employed by these three feuding kings who are all kind of grappling for control of the continent, and each one wants the twins to be exclusively in their service because they're extremely powerful. They're from this divine bloodline that's descended from this demon hunting god. They're kind of superheroes. The point where they're far stronger than the average person, but the demons are still extremely powerful, and so it's a tough match for them. So on one hand, it's a very like brutal, bloody demon slashing adventure. There's like nonstop action, but I wanted to give them a lot of character growth and development. And I think beneath the surface, the series is called A Schism of Souls, right? And, a schism is a deep and irreparable divide, and it's about how these two twins, basically due to their choices that they're forced to make in these brutal circumstances, how they grow apart, how their choices drive them apart, and how they end up going down separate paths towards these twin destinies that are hinted at in this prophecy that they get. One will rise, one will fall, and so the story explores that beneath all the katanas and gunshots.
Well, that sounds amazing. The first thing that kind of comes to my mind for sub question is, this is like, these are some things I know like I struggle with sometimes, particularly with like that. Like I said, I'm literally reading book 2 in 1,000 Li with Dao Wang right now. Got to interview him. He was awesome. I got through the first book in like 2 days. But it's like I always wonder, feudal Japan's like one of my favorites, and like China too, just like ancient China. But I'm always curious, like, for somebody like, authors like you two, like how would you say, like, did you do quite a bit of research, in terms of feudal Japan, to try and get like the authenticity of, the world, and, make the world building feel real? I'm kind of curious to like, what depths you went to there in terms of the world building, just to make us feel like, we were in a fantasy version of feudal Japan.
Yeah, I did a ton of research. Everything from like, how did their government function to simpler things like what are their buildings made out of? Like I know what they look like, but like how do I describe that in writing? Like what materials and stuff. Like what was the purpose of like that a lot of the traditional houses, the Minka, are like elevated, and the idea was that so that they wouldn't flood because it rains so much in Japan that stuff like that. Just like finding the little details that you can just convey seamlessly, like through the world building, and that requires just a lot of like random googling. Sometimes I would research halfway through the project because I just didn't. There's something I didn't know that I needed to know. A lot of social customs, like honorifics, the way that you might like present a sword or a gift to somebody, stuff like that. Think certain mannerisms, like you don't point, that's very rude, so like you would gesture like this, like, oh, look over there, not like this, unless you wanted to make a point and insult somebody, which you would, stuff like that. So I do a lot of the world building, especially from a cultural sense, like through things like that, through certain interactions. If someone leaves off an honorific, that's a slight or an outright insult depending upon the relationship. And then I did a lot of world building to the mythology as well, because it revolves around demons and the yokai. So I try to take that angle with it. So it was a mountain of research, and it's probably why it took me so long to write the project.
Yeah.
I was really scared of making a mistake, to be honest. It's
Yeah.
a really cool time period. It's not my culture. So I want to portray it authentically. And of course, I changed things. Like there are three kings, not an emperor, and that's just because that fits the story that I want. So
Yeah.
I did change things. There are things in there that are not historically accurate, but I still have to understand what was accurate to the time period, so then I could make an educated decision about what to change.
That's awesome. I just wanted to just point that out. Great examples, by the way, because I just don't like a lot of times people interview and stuff, and they'll talk about things like this, but they don't actually talk about specific examples of like what they researched or put in. I have like an urban fantasy. I'm doing like each trilogy or like series or whatever is like each person's like standalone, but essentially it's going to be like the urban. I'm going to have like another series or trilogy with each of my like 5 heroes, where it's gonna be like almost like you're assembling the urban fantasy version of the Avengers. So I have one guy like the Jade Sentinel. He like takes over for his grandfather. So I'm literally like researching right now, like Chinese history and mythology, and like trying to figure out like what to work in. Sometimes I feel like I get a little bogged down by the research, so I'm kind of just doing like a little bit like stepping stones, just to kind of get the notes and the like draft one done. But I know a lot of people, recently, I always call this a journeyman's podcast, like people, who are just starting out books 1, 2, and 3, like that kind of thing, are publishing their first book. So I just wanted to point that out and to the audience, because I think that's just a really great example of, how to make something feel real in a fantasy world, or a sci-fi world, but, still be able to, kind of maneuver what you have to. So that's a great answer there. And how did you come up with this idea? It's an amazing idea.
So I had a really scary nightmare.
Okay. All right.
I basically I dreamed that my wife and I were being like attacked by demons in our house. And when I woke up out of this nightmare, like my heart was pounding, like sweating.
Yeah.
And then my dog started like howling and freaking out. He sleeps in bed with us. He's a dachshund, so he's like a tiny burrito, and but he was freaking out. And then so, so like I settled down. I like started going back to sleep, and he like laid across my chest and just he's like staring at the door. Like I'm like, this is weird. And I start drifting off again, and I start like having a nightmare again. And how kind of like dreams can kind of like drift back a little bit, like
Oh,
your mind goes down the same track. So his dog started freaking out again. And so I'm like, this is weird. So I got up and like checked the house. It's all fine. I go back to bed. My dog sits in my chest again, and he never does that. He always sleeps between us, and he's just staring at the door, like what's going on. So I was like, I'm not superstitious at all, but I'm like, this is weird. Like and it's never happened since then. And so that was I kind of started thinking about the whole like, oh, what if it's true that animals can detect spirits and stuff like that?
yeah. Yeah.
Even though I don't believe in that stuff, it's interesting to think about.
Oh,
And
for
so
sure.
the initial premise was a guy and his dog hunting demons. And then
Mm.
um that and then I was thinking, okay, I need a cool setting for this. I wanted to stay away from Judeo-Christian demons, just because it's just not a subject I really I was particularly interested in or didn't want to touch. And I feel like there's not a broad array. There's not like Japanese mythology is so robust. There's so many different
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
There's hundreds and hundreds of yokai. Whereas Western demonology is mostly related to like fallen angels and a monotheistic culture, and I didn't feel like there was a lot of texture there for a book. So so I decided to do Japanese mythology, and then I decided to do twins because I wanted to explore like the duality of like darkness and light within a person. What happens when we
Cool.
follow different paths.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the dog turned into an 800-pound Siberian tiger
Oh, that's awesome.
because tigers are awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Um, that's super cool. I get that. I've experienced some just absolutely bizarre stuff. And I've seen some really interesting things in my life. So, but yeah, like, my brother and I love cryptozoology and historical mysteries and stuff. And my friend, she teases us all the time. She's like, do you guys really believe in all that stuff? And we're like, no, we don't believe in everything. We're like, we believe in certain things, but we're like, for us, it's like the question, is just so interesting. no matter what the question is. Like, and for us, I think it's really like, what if, and for me, as a historian and a writer, like, it just makes things more fun. So some of my kids, I'm a teacher, so I teach history and stuff. So they'll be like, ask me questions. And I'm like, but what if, and that's what's fun for me with urban fantasy is like, there was a TikTok that someone shared about like, what if the Aztecs were like that's why there were so many sacrifices if they were ran by vampires. And I was like, how am I not going to put that into my urban fantasy world, And then I have an Aztec descendant like vampire huntress I have like her own like series and stuff that I'll do, and she's gonna be like one of my like 5 Avenger style like urban fantasy characters. Because I was like, that's just fun, and my kids were like, well, you believe in that stuff? I go, I don't have to believe in it. I go, it just makes writing more fun. I said, you guys would read that, right? They're like, oh my God, it sounds awesome. I'm like, exactly. I said, so I don't have to believe everything. I go, but that kind of stuff just makes it fun. So I totally get you there. But yeah, Japanese mythology is just awesome. I always tell them, like, we go through, and we're studying, and that's the coolest thing I think is like Indian mythology, Japanese mythology, and African mythology, I think are some of the most, like more robust and just unique, and they just have so many fun things. So for me, I'm always drawn to them, writing wise. So I totally get that, but that's really cool. And tigers are awesome, of course. So that's awesome. But I love hearing where people ideas come from. So that's really cool.
One of the like funny things with Japanese mythology is that at times it is like so hardcore, and at other times it's really goofy. So it's like there's this one story, and I borrowed from it. I basically recreated their pantheon with different names and altered some of the characters and relationships to fit the mythology I need for the story better. So there's a real Japanese myth of Kagutsuchi, who is the god of fire. Basically, these 2 twins, they're called primordials. Izanagi, who's the male, Izanami, who's the female. They marry, and they give all their children are the gods, right? And so there's just the gods of the sun and god of the moon and seas and storms and stuff like that. And eventually she gives birth to Kagutsuchi, the god of fire, and he burns her and mortally wounds her as he's born. And her husband is so enraged that he chops Kagutsuchi into 8 pieces, and those are Japan's 8 great volcanoes. And his wife dies and goes to the underworld, Yomi. And so he goes to bring her back, and it's very dark down there, and he can't look at her. He begs her to return to the surface with him, and she refuses at first, but she finally agrees, but says, okay, but you cannot look at me until we're back under the sunlight. And he says, fine. But then he starts to think something's wrong. He's like, why won't she let me look at her? Like, what's wrong? So he takes like a wooden comb out of his hair and lights it on fire and holds it up like a torch. And he sees that she's like rotted away because she's already dead. So her like flesh is peeling. There's like maggots in her, and she's like this hideous like half rotted corpse. And like that's pretty hardcore, right? And she gave birth to like a child of fire, and that's why she died. So it's like super brutal. And then he's like running away from her, and he like throws grapes, so she slips on the grapes or something. or some iterations have that she gives birth to like 1,000 demons that then chase him out of the hells, and when he throws the grapes down, they stop to eat the grapes. And I'm like, what? Like that's really it's really like out of pocket for how dark it was. And then it's like grapes save the day.
It's like there was literally a meme this morning that someone shared in one of the like writing groups, and like for indie comics, and it was so funny because they're like, we get this type of Batman like Ben Affleck and this dark Batman versus Superman, and they go in present times they go, but then in the 60s like you get Batman with a surf contest versus the Joker, and it was so funny because we were all discussing like this very thing, and there's that meme going around recently where there's like one of the comic runs where I don't know, like I think Batman's dead, right? Sorry, spoilers. Sure he'll be back, but it's like Damian's talking to like Diana, like Wonder Woman, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," or whatever. And it's a great quote from her. And he's like, "Well, how do you know how I feel?" She's like, "I too am a child of a god," and it's just great mythology, right? So a lot of people in one of my groups, we've been talking about like that type of thing is like the mythology that's been built, particularly around Batman. But it's funny because people were just talking this morning about, like the other day I was talking about the awesomeness of it, but then now we were talking about that very thing, and somebody mentioned how like actual mythology has that same type of spectrum based off of cultural diffusion. That's like such a good example. I'll quote you, but I'm actually gonna bring that to the group now because it's just interesting, right? So that's what I always tell my kids, right? It's like we're really not that different, right? From like ancient peoples and how they do things. So whether it's comics or gods or whatever. So it's a really good example. It's funny too, because in Chinese mythology, they have that for like the vampires, right? Where if you have like the rice and then throw it, they have to like count, or some demons or whatever, they have to like count the individual pieces of rice. So, but it's interesting because my when I talked to R.R. Birdie, him and I talked a lot about mythology, and that's like what he does, and he got me thinking of like where like the actual story of like Hercules came from, like one of I think it like that idea, right, of cultural diffusion, and like we talked about like where the actual story originates from and stuff. So I actually want to take like Heracles and then like Hercules and have him be in like modern day in my urban fantasy world, but like actually be descendant or like be from Africa, and like one of the original like strong men is like one of the demigods of like totally blanking on the name. It's like one of the gods of like lightning or whatever. And I was like, wouldn't that be cool where you actually get to see like the original idea, and then through the story you learn about all these like different myths and stuff. So I think mythology is fascinating. So that's really cool though. I'm gonna have to check that story out because I have not heard that one. So that's really neat. Um, so in terms of, but speaking of, I know you mentioned this a little bit, but in terms of, steps in your world building, to ensure, provide that unique experience for readers, particularly for like demon hunting or, things like that. Like what were some things, that you try, or maybe even like like in terms of like their abilities, as heroes and stuff and demon hunters, like what kind of things did you focus on, in terms of, like your fantasy world to make it feel unique to readers? I'm just kind of curious at what like your main goals were there.
So it's kind of like two parts of this. I already talked about how I leaned into the mythology pretty heavily. I'll circle back around to the ability to kind of like how that plays out in terms of how you experience the character's powers and abilities and stuff. But one of the other big things that I focused on was the language. So I did not just want to uh, throw down a bunch of Japanese sounding shit and hope for the best. Again, that just didn't feel appropriate, and I didn't want to accidentally like name a character like Sock or something. So
Yeah.
so I consulted with a translator, and they helped me develop terms. So like I figured out, for example, how Japanese places are named, and then I actually named places based off that. So like
That's smart.
so the village, there's like a village in the first book called Yamacho, and that literally means mountain village, but that's actually what they would have called it. Or or a small town that's east of the capital, and it would literally be named like east of the capital, right? So stuff like that, or like White Harbor or something like that, and then and there's certain conventions for that. So we did that for name or for places. Names are all relatively period accurate. And then, for example, like a commoner might just have like a 1 or 2 syllable name. Nobles, men, all have 4 syllable names. Like Domoyoshi or Hidekata, stuff like that. So, and then for certain in-world terms, I made them up, but still use actual Japanese. So,
Mm.
for example, the divine bloodline that the main two characters descended from is called the Shikoken, and there's a mythology there, and again, it's based off true Japanese mythology that there were a handful of gods that were created from a sword that was broken, and uh, those twins are descended from one of those gods who was created from a sword, right? And Shikoken means supreme sword. So it's a nod to them as being like elite warriors who are demon hunters, but also to their background, their mythology. So that's so that was like what I did on the language front, just to make it really really immersive.
Yeah.
And so far it's worked. I had someone who they were fluent in Japanese who like didn't know about the book or anything, and they're like flipping through it, and they're like pausing, and they're like, "This is weird." I'm like, "What?" They're like, "The Japanese is actually correct."
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, I got it. So that's on the language front. And then as far as the powers and abilities, again, it's rooted in mythology. So like there's one of the main antagonists, he's this powerful demon called the Daitengu, and they wield like the wind and like lightning and stuff like that. So he can create like storms and like strong like gales and stuff like that. And then he throws lightning bolts, and he references that he wields wow, God, what's his name? I named him something. I'm thinking of the real guy's name. I named him something different in the book. Ikasora. He's like, I wield Ikasora's lightning. and that's a god of thunder and lightning. So it's kind of implied that like this god has taught him that power.
Mm.
Um, for the twins, their magic archetype is kind of like holy fire. So normally all these abilities would be present in one Shikoken. They can sense when demons are nearby, almost like a spidey sense.
Mm.
Um, they're very strong and fast. They basically have like superhuman strength and durability. And then they can do almost like a concussive blast, like what do you call it? Like a non-lethal grenade. It's like
Oh,
blinding. So just like
oh,
they emit a burst of blinding light,
oh,
and
like a flashbang.
yes, but that's what I was
Yeah,
looking for, like a flashbang. Um,
that's cool.
and it blinds and like debilitates demons for a few seconds. It
Interesting.
also, if demons are invisible, it illuminates them because the demons appear as like pure shadow when like the rest of
Oh,
everything else is light. So
yeah,
they
yeah.
use it. So they use it when they're facing like invisible foes. And then they can also like coat their weapons in fire that clings to demons,
Cool.
almost like napalm, basically. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, a basic like flaming sword thing. They can also wield it with their bare hands. They can't throw it or anything, but basically it's like whatever they touch will catch, and if they're holding onto something, it'll catch.
Mm.
Um, and then if that touches a demon, it like immolates them. In this case, each twin has one or two of those abilities. So it's because it's kind of implied that like they're twins, so like they were, or initially at conception, like one
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
And and so it was also a way to nerf them and not make them both super powerful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just think that's so cool because like I said, like with my Jade Sentinel character, like I'm thinking like, okay, it has Jade-like powers. It's gotta be some sort of energy. In my urban fantasy world, though, like there are certain demons or monsters or whatever that are from here, which are fine and anybody can deal with if you have the ability. But then I have like certain, I can't say because I'm releasing stuff soon, but like there are certain groups that are from another like realm essentially. And if they're from another realm, you almost need like their kryptonite. So you need like almost like an obsidian type material to make like a blade or something like that. So I'm like trying to decide, right? Like to what extent like his powers are going to be like, like who like, like what type of creatures or monsters or whatever mythological creatures is he able to handle, and then that's like eventually why he's going to need help from some of the other groups or characters because he can't handle them fully. So I think that's super interesting. So that's like I'm trying to like kind of decide like what his jade powers are going to be. I'm going back to certain Chinese mythology for that. So I think that's just a great example though of maybe it's like some problems that people are having that I know who are like watching or will watch. So I think that's just a great example of how you did things to kind of try and help them out a little bit. I know that this conversation is already helping me out with some things I'm stuck with, so I definitely appreciate that. It's kind of funny. It's so funny because I talk to my wife about this all the time. I'm like, the problem I'm having, it's like serendipity, right? It's like the problem I'm having or thinking about, it's like I'm always interviewing people all of a sudden that like help me like through that. People are like, oh, it takes a lot of time and energy to podcast. I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, I wouldn't gotten two things fully written like rough draft wise even if I hadn't been talking to people about like doing different things. And it's just interesting I think to see that other people have the same problem as you and also like how they solved it, which brings me again to just a follow-up question, like how did you find like your translator, like how did you like go about that process, because I think that's helpful for our audience to know. So
Kind of a funny story. So I'm a personal trainer. I have a client. He went to Japan, met a girl, and she's actually from France, but she'd been living in Japan for like a decade, so fluent in Japanese and English. Um, and they remained in contact, and then he had told her, that I was writing a book that was, based on Japan, and I mentioned at some point like we need help with the language, and he's like, yeah, she'll help you with it. So,
oh, that's
uh,
awesome.
yeah, so I would have had to seek one out like through some other forum otherwise, but in this case, I knew them. And then the funny thing is, like, I joked that because they were staying in touch, I was like, "You're gonna marry this girl, you just don't know it yet." And then he actually married her. Like,
Oh, that's hilarious.
yeah, they just got married like a month ago.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
um,
He's just trying to help you out for future books.
yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
It's funny. Because I paid her her basic like hourly rate for she's a freelancer, and so I paid her of course. And then like we're all been out for drinks and stuff a couple times since then. Like we're like friends now, so we just hang out. And I was like, "You're still gonna charge me when I need your help again for the second book?" He's like, "No, it's fine."
That's awesome. I just want to point out to our audience, like I know, like I had like Kevin Hearn, wrote Iron Druid Chronicles. Met him; he was an amazing guy. Talked to him on and off last couple years on like X or Facebook, whatever. I asked him. He gave me some amazing like research links, search engines. So there's those kind of things. I know some people I've had on here, have just gone on to Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, or gone to university sites. Like I live in the same town as Cornell, so there have been people I know that have reached out to, certain professors or people that, are researching, historians, things like that. So if you find a reference book, don't forget you can actually just, email those people as well, because a lot of times they're like very happy to help you out and to explain their research. So just want to point that out to our audience. But like Cal said, there's a lot of different ways that, you can get those things done. So, but I always like when people tell me like how they did those things, because I never would have thought of getting a translator. So that's just an amazing, amazing idea that I'm going to think about trying to do now, or find someone to help me out. So that's genius.
I'm glad I did. So at first, I was at first in the first draft, I was just naming things off of like vibes, and I did what research I could with Google Translate, but stuff it's wrong sometimes.
It's hard, yeah, yep.
But there was one where like I had named like some province and it meant nuclear dismantling, and I was like that doesn't fit. So yeah, so I'm really glad that that I went that route. It was kind of a pain, but it was 100% worth it.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, my one of my main characters is from my urban fantasy is an ex-marine, and in the first prequel novella, he's a marine. Well, I'm not good at that, so and I'm more of a martial artist. So if you want to know about any other weapon and historian, I can help you, but I'm not a big gun person. So archery, yes, but not guns. So I'm like, I don't know, and I'm like, I want people that are have been in that field or are in that field to enjoy this character. And he goes from being a marine to later on a monster hunter. It's like the process of how he does that for the prequel trilogy. So I reached out to like J.R. Wise, and he's a veteran marine, so he has been helping me out so much. So I just, like you said, I really recommend finding somebody that like knows, because he was like, this is wrong, don't do this. And like the amount of drafts that he saved me where I just ask him questions has been absolutely ridiculous. So I definitely recommend finding, somebody that can help you out that actually knows, because it'll save you a lot of time and grief and bad reviews or people being like, that's not right. So that's a very smart idea on your part. So I'm going to steal that, Cal. Sorry. I'll give you credit though, I promise. So
real quick,
yeah, go ahead.
What martial art do you practice?
Excuse me, I'm so sorry, I'm like losing my voice this week. So currently I'm doing Washinru karate. I had to take a little break because my son was born, so now he's to that point where I can actually like leave the house for a couple hours at a time. So I'm actually heading back next month. I used to do taekwondo, so I got a second new black belt in that. I was doing jujitsu for a long time, hurt my back, can't wait to go back to that, and judo. But yeah, right now I'm basically just like doing like Washinru. I'm pretty close. I got like 2 more brown belts till my black. That's just always been like a dream of mine. That was like my first martial art I fell in love with. So yeah, it's definitely, I can't wait to kind of get to that point. And I think once I do that, I'll kind of go back, even though I'm getting older now, so it's kind of ridiculous, but to go back to like judo and jujitsu, those were like 2 of my favorites I've ever done, particularly judo. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I studied Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, nice.
So through like a like a mixed martial arts scope.
Yeah.
I wrestled in high school and then got into mixed martial arts after that. So
yeah. I used to have a team I used to train in Michigan. It was really fun. Yeah, we did that for a while. I wanted to open a gym for so long, but then like there was just so long, like so many like late nights, and it was like I was like traveling and everything. So after a while, I'm like, I actually, before the pandemic, I almost got with the jiu-jitsu school here, one of them, and I was almost getting in with my own judo club. But then like work and life and stuff, and I got injured and stuff. So yeah, at some point I definitely want to go back, but I love Muay Thai. That's like one that I definitely enjoy. There's not really anybody around here that does it too much now, unfortunately. Hopefully somebody comes back into town, but I've studied with a lot of people for that too. Boxing for a long time is one of my favorites. Yeah, I'll do any martial art, honestly. I used to do Hapkido and Aikido. There used to be a guy that was really good in town that was like retired, and him and I would train, and he was just an like he learned from some of the best out in like California, like at like prime time. People always tell me like Aikido doesn't work. I'm like, well, go talk to go talk to Charlie, because I'm like, this old guy will have you, and like those little circles that he makes are just like absolutely incredible. But yeah, I love martial arts. That's really cool. Are you still practicing now then?
No, I've so I went to grad school, and that was
Yeah.
when I stopped
Me
training. I
too.
was
Yeah.
like, I kind of realized I realized that like my best asset is my brain, not my body, and I should
Yeah.
probably stop taking blows to the head.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and I've always, I'm a personal trainer right now, like so I've always enjoyed staying in shape and pushing like my physical limitations. So I started doing that through powerlifting and other strength sports instead. So I've competed in like in CrossFit, Olympic lifting, and primarily powerlifting, which is kind of where I found my wheelhouse.
Oh,
So
cool.
so that's kind of where I've turned my like physical pursuits.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. For me, like watching her is nice because it's like a huge blend. It's like that, like there's so much you can do with it. So if you like know, there's like judo, they do like everything basically. So it's like old school. I would say like karate or martial arts. It's like one of the original, like they go back to like the MMA roots of karate. So like having the ground game or above. So it's been for me like a nice addition. But my instructor is like 78. I've had UFC fighters I've trained with or trained, and nobody scares me more than her. Like her technique is, you read about books, and things, and these, small little guys, or whatever, these ancient, Aikido practitioners or whatever, just being like super good at what they do, right? Almost being superhuman. And my instructor is like that. Like I've never been more afraid of somebody in my entire life. Her technique's incredible. Just so much power, almost 200 pounds. I work out a lot. I train for years, and I hope one day to have like 1/10 of like her ability. But yeah, for me, it's been nice because she does a lot of internal stuff. So people always ask me like, you go to karate to like, help your back? I'm like, yeah, otherwise I probably would like be in a wheelchair, honestly, half the time. But it's been so nice internally, and there's been a lot of stuff that she's been able to help me with. But that's kind of like my thing now. But my wife, she's like, you're gonna have to go back to judo and jujitsu, right? I was like, yes. I was like, I love both of them, and gonna have to just deal with the bone aches and stuff like that at some point. But yeah, that's really cool. Powerlifting's awesome too, though. My friend's been doing that for a while. Shout out to Adam. Um, so in terms of, I know you talked a bit about, like the magic and powers and stuff. I know we're kind of running out on time too, but I thought that was a good follow-up question there. But I'm definitely, curious with like, which of the characters do you resonate with most and why?
Probably Jin. I think he's definitely easier for me to write. He
Interesting.
and this is it's kind of funny because he's a surly, violent jackass. He's very bad tempered, very foul mouthed, a very like singular driven, like point me at my enemy and let me kill them kind of guy. And he has
Yeah,
no patience, no patience for politics, no social tact.
yeah,
Um, and so now I don't think that's my default personality, but I do empathize with some of his frustration.
it's fair.
Just like this is the problem. How can everybody not see it? Like why don't we just do something about it? Like that kind of
Yeah,
attitude. Um, and he's fun to write because I really, but he's also very like loyal. He's freakishly loyal. He's pretty selfless. And so that's kind of the source of a lot of his bitterness is he thinks he's trying to do what's right through any means necessary. He's an ends justify the means kind of person
yeah,
when the story starts off. And um, so he's very bitter because he feels like he's the only one who's really committed to this fight. Uh, so I relate to that struggle. I relate to him being like an asshole with really good intentions. And then his twin sister Shorter, by the other hand, she's very diplomatic, very charming. She can be very shrewd and manipulative. She knows what people want. She knows how to give them what they want or appear to do so while actually getting what she wants. She plays the game really well, and um, and she has her own set of flaws and her own motivations and everything. She has her own set of bitterness as a woman in a feudal society. She's looked down on and overlooked. And her thing is she wants to get to a point where that doesn't happen anymore.
yeah,
So she's kind of power hungry to an extent, very ambitious, and she's fun to write. But I relate to her less because I just have not experienced a lot of those things.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I so uh she's hard for me to write, but I still think that she's very interesting to explore. But I have to go a little bit outside my personal experiences for that. I have to do a little bit more, let's say like empathetic extrapolation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I just always find that an interesting question because That's like I have characters like that where I'm nothing like this character or very little. However I write that character is going to be more exciting, or more interesting. So I always find it interesting how people kind of get into the headspaces of their characters. I know some people that, like, I had a friend that was like, "Can you read this?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I read their stuff. They're like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "All three of your main characters are the same character." I was like, and I've been there too, right? Like, I just, they're just too similar because you're like writing you almost, right? Instead of writing the characters. So I always find that one interesting with how people answer that. And like we, talked earlier too, this one I think is also difficult to answer, but I always find it interesting for people's responses. But what is one world or setting you wish you can visit and why?
So yeah, like we were kind of talking about this a little before the show, but I wouldn't want to go anywhere that I read because I read primarily dark fantasy where everybody dies and the society is just brutal and gross. So I'll pick like some distant happy planet in Star Wars, way far away
Oh,
from the main
good call.
conflict, somewhere where there's just like lots of plants growing and you can just like go fishing and hang out and stuff, and but still technologically advanced to where like you have plenty of comfort.
Yeah, I think
That's
that's fair. That's mine too, honestly. Yeah, but I think that's a really good one. But yeah, it gets kind of dangerous, right? Like, because you're like, oh, Jim Butcher. I'm looking at the books I have sitting next to me that I've been reading recently, and I'm like, none of them would I survive. I got like Jim Butcher, Side Jobs, Priest of Lies by Peter McLean, Dungeons and Dragons, Fallbacks, and then Marvel's The Head of Mirror by Richard Lee Beyer. So and then Sean McGuire, Rosemary Roof. So none of those do I think I would survive. Martial arts skills or no. So yeah, I definitely understand that. So I too would pick a similar planet in Star Wars. So yeah, we could fish next to each other or something, whatever they got
there we
going on. That's really funny. I know we're running down time, but I want to make sure you have enough time to, let us know, what you have going on currently. So do you have any news updates or any current projects, anything like that you can share with us before we head out?
Yes. So Shadowbane, of course, is available on Amazon, and also special hardcover editions directly through my website that are
Cool.
printed and delivered through Ingram Spark if you want a
Oh,
hardcover copy of that. Um, I am in the very early stages, like the pre-announcement stages of getting an audiobook done. So I guess this will probably be the first place that it drops unless I announce it in the next month. But the paperwork is signed and dotted. We just haven't established dates yet or anything. But at this point, I can say that there will be an audiobook that I can anticipate being released late this year. I am almost at the beta stage on the sequel to Shadowbane. And so I'm anticipating a release probably early 2026. So I'm excited. I've been banging my head against the keyboard for most of this year. So I'm
I know that
excited
feeling.
to have that at the stage where there's an actual story and it's workable. So and then after that, it'll be the third book. So that's what's coming down the pipeline.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely know that. I'm like doing that currently myself. Yeah, sometimes I just like listen to the sound in my head hitting the keyboard to try and give me another idea. So, but good luck. I definitely know how that feels being in those in between stages for that. But I want to thank you again for coming on, Cal. This has been awesome. So I just got to say before we go, like you actually came up on my feed, and then I was like, oh, I saved your Shadowbane's cover, and I was like, I'm gonna come back to this and this author, and then I had like 3 or 4 of my friends were like, hey, have you checked out this book? This seems like your thing, because I had shared some other, kind of like similar fantasy worlds, characters, authors, things like that, and I was like, no, not yet. So that's actually where I found you. So was through recommendation actually, which I think is really
Really?
cool. So yeah, so Instagram's working for you. I just want you to know.
That's
And
awesome.
you popped up.
Glad to
Yeah.
hear that.
I just like people to know. So because
Yeah,
sometimes it seems like you're in the sea, right? And
it
not
does.
sure. So
Yeah,
yep.
I appreciate that. It's nice to know I'm not just like shouting into the void.
Yeah. But for me, it's really nice being like it's like a newer dad. I love when people do audio though, because it's so hard for me still to just do paperback or to just do like right now I've been doing like half and half. So anytime someone does that, it just makes it easier for me. So I'll do like 50% audio and then I'll read the rest on like Kindle or something. But it's like I have like 4 right now that I just got 50% of the way. So I have to find like another audio book. But I haven't really had time to finish the Kindle versions. But so that I'm really really excited for that announcement because that means I can definitely try and get you squeezed in a little sooner this year. So for me, that's like really super exciting. And I like the contrast too. It's been nice to like hear the names and stuff, the characters. I can kind of get them in my head a little bit more and then kind of read from there. But that's really exciting for you. So congrats on that. I look forward to that. Love to have you back in the future, talk about book 2. So, keep me in mind, I always save spots for alumni or extra episodes or something like that. So definitely keep me in mind, in the loop there. So I definitely look forward to that. For our audience members, in case this is the first time that you've been here or something like that, you can find all of Cal's book and social links down below in the description, anywhere where you're watching or listening to this podcast. So please make sure you check those out for him. And that's really the only reason we're here, is to share cool things like Cal's books and world. So please do that. And don't forget, guys, review, because that's the way that everybody is seen. But Cal, thank you so much for coming on. Anytime you want to come and chat, you just let me know. Send me anything you got. Anytime you want to share it on social media or something like that, message me, email me, and I will get it out there. We're here to help. We also have a podcast group if you're on Facebook, or if you just want something on there, just message it to me and I will share whatever. We share 24/7 all year long. There's no restrictions really. So just let me know and we'll help you out to the best of our ability.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. And yeah. Definitely love to come back someday.
Yeah, I was actually talking just real quick. I know before we get going, I was talking to like Da Wong and a couple other people, like I said, kind of, similar fantasy tropes or worlds, stuff like that. So I'm actually setting aside sometime this summer to do seminars. So you're actually on my list for that to contact. It's be like 3 or 4 of you guys. And, I'll send you guys, 1 or 2 like kind of bigger questions. And, if you're interested, we can chat and kind of go through there. And that way, readers will get another opportunity to, to check out your work and your world and, kind of go from there. So if that sounds interesting, I can definitely send you a follow-up email really soon.
Yeah, sign me up.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, I'll be emailing you shortly, my friend. Other than that, hope you have a great rest of the day and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, man. You too.
See ya. Have a good day.